Hello, I'm David Sparks, and welcome to the free sample of the Shortcuts Field Guide iOS 13 edition. Apple made so many changes with shortcuts with iOS 13 that I was able to build a whole new course. It's over 100 videos and over 6 hours of video, and it's all custom tailored to help you come along from beginner to expert in shortcuts. I had a lot of fun making the course. I want to share some of it with you in this video, and I hope you learned something from it. In the beginning, Apple gave us the iPhone, and as much as we love the iPhone, it was not very friendly to automation. In fact, there was really no automation possible on the iPhone. Immediately, people started trying to find ways around it, and the callback URL was one of the greatest. With the callback URL, you could have data that would transfer between applications using this kind of obscure URL callback, and it worked. But not all apps supported it, and there was limitations to it, and it was really kind of a bolt-on automation solution. What we really wanted was Auto, the automator, like we had on the Mac, with the automation applications on the Mac that allowed you to build automation kind of like stacking a Lego brick. And we got that eventually with an application called Workflow. Workflow was put together by a really smart group of people that used callbacks and every other trick up their sleeve on iOS to make automation happen between applications. One of the best things they did was figure out how to take different kinds of data out of a application and transfer it to another. For instance, if you had a song, not only could you get the song file, you could get the name of the song, the beats per minute, the genre of the music, the cover art from the album, and then you could do stuff with it via automation. But because it was a third-party application, it was limited in exactly what it could do. But at the end of the day, it was automation on iOS, and we loved it. And then one day, Apple purchased Workflow. They brought it in-house, and we were all a little terrified and a little hopeful that they were going to make something awesome with automation built from the inside of iOS, and indeed they did that with the release of Shortcuts in 2018. Best of all, they didn't just release it and forget it, they continued to develop on it, and with the release of iOS 13 in 2019, Shortcuts got even stronger. The purpose of this course is to teach you how to use shortcuts and to make amazing automations on your iPhone and your iPad. I've broken up the course into sections, and in each section there are individual videos, so you can pick and choose as you work your way through the course. The first section is the introduction, and you just started that with this video. In the introduction, you're going to learn the basics of the application, the user interface, how to get around, how to see the gallery, and just some of the basics of shortcuts. The second section is called Key Concepts, and my goal here is to help folks who have not been programmers learn how to program. Shortcuts is built to be a consumer product, but there are still things you need to understand, like variables and Shortcuts magic variables. This new version of Shortcuts uses a new programming model and conversational shortcuts. These are basics to shortcuts that you're going to use in lots of shortcuts, so I wanted to take my time with those so everybody could understand that going in. Once you understand the key concepts, then you can start digging into the meat of shortcuts. We start with triggers, and triggers are the things that trigger an automation. It can be a simple thing like you pressing a button on your phone or you giving Siri a command, but it can also be something advanced now with shortcuts because it has advanced triggers like connecting to a Wi-Fi signal or even tapping your phone against an NFC sticker. All of those are covered, each with their own individual video in the triggers section. Next is one of the biggest sections in here, and it's about actions. Once you trigger an automation, what is it going to do? Well, Shortcuts has support throughout the iPhone and iPad operating systems, along with third-party applications. In this section, I've broken out separate videos for all of those different actions so you can see how they work. So if you want to build shortcuts around your calendar, there's a video to watch that explains calendar actions. Maybe you want to work with contacts or Safari or some specific application that has built-in support for shortcuts. I've made videos on all of them in this section. You can go through those so you can pick and choose again to pick the ones that make the most sense to you. But at the end of the day, my goal for you once you finish this section is to have a thorough understanding of the available actions to you with shortcuts. The next section bookends nicely with the key concepts, and I call this the advanced concepts. There's certain things that shortcuts can do that take a little more knowledge, like base 64, where you can encode an image into a shortcut, or those URL callbacks I was talking about earlier. You can still use those in shortcuts. There's also some advanced programming concepts, like more advanced use of variables and counts and if statements. I've created separate videos on each one of those concepts in this advanced concepts section. So if you really want to up your shortcuts game, take your time going through this section and learn how those advanced concepts work. And the next section is what I call the payoff, useful shortcuts. And in here, I have collected some of my favorite shortcuts that I use every day. And I'm giving you the shortcuts. There's a download link for each one of these. I walk through the shortcut with you. Sometimes I build it right in front of you. I explain how you can alter it to make it work better for you. And it's 32 shortcuts that you can just start using. So even if you don't want to learn everything, go through the useful shortcuts section and see what you can pull out of that for your own use. And then finally, we get to the conclusion. This is a big course, 106 videos, about 6 hours worth of content. There's a lot in here to learn, but by the end, you are going to be a pro at this stuff. I think that's enough yakking from me about how this course works. Let's get started learning shortcuts. Okay, enough talking about shortcuts. Let's make one. I'm in the Shortcuts app, and you can see the plus button in the upper right corner. That allows you to create a new shortcut. I'm going to go ahead and tap it now, and now we've created a new shortcut. First thing I'm going to do is tap the ellipses button next to the name and give it an icon. And this one is going to involve photos, so I'm going to use the photo, the camera. And these are always easy to see, except when you're doing them while recording a video and everybody's watching. There it is. And we're going to call this first shortcut. And tap done. We've given it a name. If we exit out, tapping the done button, you see there it is at the bottom, and it's got the little camera icon. Now, if I tap the ellipses button inside the icon, it brings me back to this edit view. And this is going to be a simple shortcut. Have you ever gone somewhere with family and you kept taking a bunch of pictures that you just wanted to text message to a few people? That's a pain in the neck. You can make that easier with a shortcut. So what we're going to do is first we're going to get the last photo. And if I just type last photo up in the search bar, you can see there is a command or a shortcut step called get latest photos. You can change that to as many as you want. I'm just going to make it the last one photo. If I tap on the Show More button, I can say include screenshots or do not. I do not want to include screenshots. This is just for photos. So there we go. And I'll hide that. And then the next thing we do is send that off as a message. So I'm going to just type message. You can see send message is another command. I can drag it in there. And it's drew a line between the first step and the second step. So one of the nice things is Shortcuts tries to figure out what you're doing. And since it knows that I picked one photo in the first step and I have a send message in the second step, it's automatically going to attach that. Now, if that wasn't there, if I delete that, you see the line between them disappeared. I can put the photo back in though. All I have to do is tap on that message. And you can see at the bottom of the screen where it says variables, there's either the magic variable, which I'll talk about later, or there is just a button for the latest photos. So it's looking at that step. It's in the essence added a variable. I'll tap it. And then I'm going to put it back in. And then you can put recipients in there. So I've went ahead and added my wife and kids as recipients. So when I run this script, every time it's going to send the pictures to just those 3 people. This is the joy of automation. You don't have to do that manually every time you want to run this. So I'll tap done. So then to run it, all I have to do is press the play button in the lower right corner to kick it off, or I could exit the script and just tap on first shortcut. I'll do that. It's going, it's getting the most recent picture I took, and it's set it up as a text message. Now all I have to do is press the send button and send a random picture to my wife and kids and make them wonder what I'm doing again. I'm going to tap the ellipses again to go back in. I'm going to tap the Show More button now. So when I uncheck the Show When Run box, it will just send the photo with a message without me even seeing the draft. That makes the automation even faster and easier. I use a script very much like this when we have family events and I want to share photos with just a very select few people and not necessarily put them on the internet. But let's have a little bit more fun with this. Now, as we go through the course, you're going to see so many different steps you can do with shortcuts, with all these different apps and options we've got. And there's screencasts on all of this stuff, so don't let it overwhelm you. But the way I usually find these steps, once I know what they are, is I just search for them. So I'm going to search for markup. There it is. This is a cool step they added, I believe, last year to shortcuts. And I'm just going to stick that in between the photo and the message. And what this allows me to do is draw on the picture before I send it. So I've got it picking one photo, then allowing me to mark it up, and then I need to send it. Now the problem is it shows the latest photos here is the variable that it's picking, which is this first box. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that now. And instead, I'll tap on it again. And we want to get this markup result down here on the variable list. So rather than grabbing the photo from the first block, we're going to grab the photo from the second block after we've marked it up. So let's run that now. Tap done, tap on the shortcut. Okay, it's grabbed the image of me, and then I can have fun with it if I want. There we go. Give myself a mustache. And when I'm done, I just tap done in the upper left corner. And then it opens up the message, and I'm ready to send it with my markup. So there's a simple first shortcut. It's really only 2 steps, but when we add the additional markup, that adds a 3rd step to it. And it gives you an idea of the power of automation with shortcuts. So as you work through this course, you're going to put together this library of knowledge with all the triggers and actions that shortcuts can do, and then you're going to be able to build your very own shortcuts to take what's tedious and make it automatic. In this section, we're going to cover some key concepts to shortcuts, and these are what I consider to be the foundational building blocks upon which most shortcuts are built. So go ahead and take your time, go through this video series, watch these key concepts, and make sure you understand them before you go forward. There's a lot of more advanced stuff later. In fact, there's a whole section on advanced concepts later. But to begin with, you need to understand the key concepts, and that's what these videos will give you. Let's take a moment to talk about variables. Now, if you're not a programmer, you may be tuning me out right now, maybe even just a little intimidated by that term, but don't be. It's really not that difficult for the sake of using shortcuts. Variable is like a box. It's a box you can put something in. For instance, you could put a word in, or you could put a number in. The thing with shortcuts is that there's all kinds of variables. But there's so much more, because with shortcuts, those boxes can hold all kinds of information. Just a couple that I can think of are numbers, words or big groups of words, pictures, albums or songs or calendar events. And that's just a few. The magic of shortcuts is allowing you to take those variables or those little pieces of information and do things with them both in shortcuts and moving them between applications. Before shortcuts, there was no way to do that. Shortcuts still really is the only way to do that. And its real power is taking bits of data and moving it to other places for you to do things. So don't be intimidated by variables. Just look at them as a mechanism to get that little piece of information you want to work on from one place to the next in your shortcut script. Let me show you a little bit in shortcuts. So let's play with some variables. The first question is, how do you create a variable? Quite often, you inherit a variable. For instance, when you create a shortcut that is an action extension, a variable may be a website that you got from Safari or some text you selected on your screen. But let's create a variable inside shortcuts. And one of the easiest ways to do that is the ask for input command. Just type ask for, and you'll see there it is. I'm going to drag it in. In fact, I'm going to drag 2 versions of it in, 2 copies of it. And the first question we're just going to add 2 numbers and say, what's the first number? And the second one will be, what's the second number? I'm going to tap on the show more button, and we're going to change the input type here to number. And this is one example right here where you can see different kinds of variables. You can collect text, you can collect a number, you can collect a URL or a website. You can get a date, a time, or a date and a time. You can also, in this case, put a default number. Let's go ahead and put 42 in there. Why not? And then for the second number, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make that a number as well. And we're going to make that 77 because a certain movie came out that year that I really liked. All right, so we've collected two variables. In fact, let's go ahead and run that. What's the first number? 42. I can change that. Let's make it 10. And then what's the second number? 77. Let's make that 10 as well. And we just collected two variables, and you'll see there's showing a result. It's the second number that we picked up. But we didn't do anything with the variables, so let's have some fun with them. I'm going to use a command called set variable. And this is a little bit of legacy stuff for shortcuts because set variable is not used as often now that we have magic variables, and I've got another video on that right after this one. But for learning variables, I think set variable makes a lot of sense. So we're going to set the first variable. We'll call this the first number. And then we're going to set a second variable called the second number. So we've collected two numbers and we've labeled them. Now let's do some math. I'm going to calculate. And if you tap on the clear button here, and then you tap on that first number, you'll see below you actually have some variables listed because I declared the first number and the second number. They're actually listed as variables on my list. So we're going to take the first number and add it to the second number. And then we're going to set a variable again. And we're going to call that the sum. So the sum is the calculated result. Now finally we can do a result display, show result. And we're going to say, put some words in here. First number, so we're drawing the first number, plus second number equals the sum. And there's some variables we've used. So we've used three variables in order to run this. And let's see how it goes. Okay, first number 42. This time we're going to make it 10 again. Second number 77. We'll make that 10 as well. And there's our result. 10 plus 10 equals 20. That's a use of variables. You don't have to do just numbers, though. You could also turn these into text if you wanted. So we're going to say first name. And we'll change it to first name, the variable name. The second one we'll change to last name. And change the inquiry to be last name. And change that to text. And we don't need to do any math on names, so we can delete that step, and then change the script to say, oops. Sometimes it takes a minute to delete all the old stuff. We're going to say full name is first name space last name. That's an interesting point. When you're using variables, think about spaces and hyphens when you're spelling them out. If you put them right next to each other, there's no spaces. All right, so we're good. Let's run that one. First name, David. Last name, Sparks. Full name is David Sparks. All right, so we're working with variables. It's really not that complicated. The ways people get hung up are a few. The first is thinking that you have to deal with the variable all in one section of your shortcut, when in fact variables can be called throughout a shortcut. There are some very long shortcuts as you go through this course with, some that have 50 or even 100 actions in them, and we have a variable at the very top of the shortcut that you don't see until the very end. The morning report shortcut is one that I'm thinking about that has an example of that. The other hangup is the variable names. It's really easy to just let the Shortcuts app auto-name this stuff as you put it together, but that always leads to confusion later. Take the time when you're making these shortcuts to give them names, like I was giving the variables here specific names. And later when we use magic variables, I'm going to teach you how to name those as well. Having clear names of your variables throughout your shortcut is going to save you many times. For example, these ask for inputs that Shortcuts has. Shortcuts often just refers to them as an ask for input, but if you have 5 of them, you're going to have 5 ask for inputs, and suddenly you're going to get confused about which variable you're using, and things will start breaking. It's really not that complex. You just need to give them clear names and in your head have a clear idea what you're doing with them. If you have a complex script, there's nothing wrong with opening an Apple Note or even getting a piece of paper and a pencil out and just writing down a list of the variables you're using so you can keep track of them all in your head. And the last bit I want to cover before going on to magic variables in the next video is that not all variables are one-dimensional. A lot of them have multiple dimensions to them. If you get a song, for example, not only do you get the name of the song, you get the year it was published, you get the genre of music it is, you get the album it's in. There's all this extra data you can get about these variables. Calendar events are another one that we use throughout this course, and quite often I'm pulling out a location or a time or a name of an event. So as you pull items in to become variables, keep an open mind about what kind of data they can give you. And in the next video about magic variables, you're going to learn how to farm those variables and get all of that data out. Hey gang, I'm back and I'm here to introduce the section on triggers. Triggers are where the magic happens with a shortcut. It's the very first event that kicks off the automation. An automation is if something happens, then other things happen. Well, that first something is the trigger. Now, traditionally in shortcuts, there weren't very many triggers. You could push a button on your screen. If Siri was going to cooperate, maybe you could make it happen with your voice. But starting with iOS 13, Apple added a bunch of new triggers, and now there's all sorts of cool things you can do, like a certain time of day, or when you arrive at your home, or even connect to a Wi-Fi signal. I've got a bunch of them covered in this section. Each trigger gets its own video explaining exactly how it works and how you can connect it with actions to make your own automations. So dig in, enjoy this section, and get really good at triggers. One of the nice things about iOS 13 shortcuts is all of the ways we can trigger shortcuts now. There's just an abundance of riches. But to begin with, I want to talk about the simplest, and that's just the pressing of the button on your device. So let's see how that works. I'm going to create a new shortcut by tapping the Create Shortcut box at the bottom left corner. And we're going to give it a name. We're going to call this Simple Triggers. And just for giggles, I'm going to tap on the icon and give it a new glyph. How about the magic wand? There we go. And we'll click Done. This is a simple trigger. We're just going to make it do one thing, display an alert. So I'm going to go over to the search bar and type alert and drag over show alert. And we're going to change the name of that to success with an exclamation point. There we go. That's the shortcut. The first way to trigger a shortcut is the little play button at the lower right corner of the edit menu. This used to be at the top of the screen in prior versions of Workflow and Siri shortcuts, so it has moved, but I use this all the time when I'm working on a shortcut and I want to make sure it works properly. So I just hit the little the play button in the lower right corner. I'm going to do it right now. And you can see it worked. It gave me the alert dialog box that said success. So that's the first way you can trigger a shortcut. Beyond that, you can also trigger it in the Shortcuts application. Scrolling down, you'll see the Simple Triggers box here in the lower left corner. If I just tap on that, it triggers the shortcut. So I can do that by just tapping on it and then clicking OK. And you can see I triggered it as well. You can also trigger it. I'm going to go back into the shortcut now. You can also trigger it from the desktop. To do that, hit the ellipse next to the Simple Triggers button. And then you see there's an Add to Home Screen button. I'm going to go ahead and tap that and then click Add. And now it's added to my home screen, so I click Done. And if I exit the application, you can see there is an icon there for Simple Triggers. I'm going to go ahead and tap that. And then once again, it ran the shortcut and gave me the success dialog box. You can also run it on your home screen from the widget set. You can see here I've got my shortcuts displayed in my Today View widgets that show on the left side of the screen. This is one of the nice things that we got with iOS 13. This is particularly useful, by the way, on the iPad, so you can have your shortcuts always available to you. And I've got a whole bunch of them here that I've put together over the years. I'm going to go back now into shortcuts. I'm going to go down to the bottom and select that Simple Triggers shortcut. And I'm going to hit the ellipsis again, and I'm going to say Show in Widget. So that's already selected. So I click that, and it's selected. Now the trick is getting it to appear, because I have so many that it doesn't show up. It runs out of room. And this is something I am always fighting with shortcuts. I have so many that I can't put them all on that widget. So I have to be a little more careful. So now I'm just going to grab the shortcut and move it up to the top of the list. All the way to the top. And I have a lot of shortcuts, as you may see. You probably don't have as many. That's okay. You will when you're done. All right, so we've got that at the very top now. I'm going to click Done. I'm going to go back out, and you can see now Simple Trigger shows up at the very top of the list. I'll go ahead and tap it. And there we go. We got success. In fact, I got it right in the Today View widget. While traditionally pressing these on-screen buttons was one of the only ways to trigger shortcuts, there's a lot more ways to do it now, and I'm going to cover those in this section. Nevertheless, don't discount these. These buttons are great, and it's one of the most common ways that I trigger shortcuts. So in the last section, we went through triggers. In this section, we're going through actions. And actions are where you make things happen on your devices using shortcuts. There's a whole bunch of them here. I've broken them down by category. Some of them are based on application, and some of them are based on the type of work you're going to do. I think it makes logical sense. There's a bunch of video content in here, so go through it, take your time, and learn about all the actions you can do with shortcuts. And as you do that, I guarantee you will think of ideas for cool shortcuts that will help you out every day. Shortcuts also has support for contact management through automation. I'm in the application list. I'm going to tap on the contacts button, and you can see there's several different contact related commands. The first is the most basic. It just lets you grab a contact in the shortcut. You hit the little plus button, and then you can select someone from the group, and then you've got their contact card that you can use elsewhere in your shortcut. If you don't know who you're looking for, you can also use a find contacts command. And this one applies filters like many of the shortcut find commands do. I'm going to look through all contacts, but let's add some filters. First one is we're going to say the group is Area 51, and add one more filter where first name is Lynette, because I know there's only one in that group named Lynette. And then we found the contact. Then you want to do something with it. You can get details from the content. I'm going to drag that in, and it's just going to grab the one from the selection above. You can see it drew a line right there automatically to do that for me. And then the detail you want, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can pick from the contact card. I'm just going to pick email address. And just to display it, why don't we put a text block in and just say Lynette's email is, and then we're going to grab the variable from that contact extraction email address from contact. And you can see that it's created a variable for us. It says email address. I bet that's the one. And we're good. So we'll go ahead and run that. It's searching the database, found Lynette, and it gave us her email address. Now, while I was doing that, you may have been thinking, hey, David, why are you doing get information from contact? Don't magic variables solve that problem? And you would be correct. So there's an easier way to do this. You can remove a step if you want. I'm going to delete this second block. And then we're going to say Lynette's email address is, I'm going to delete that. And then we're going to put in a magic variable, select the contact, and then you can see right there, I can select what I'm going to get out of that. We'll get the email address, click done, and run it again. And we'll get the exact same result. So there's more than one way to skin a cat with shortcuts. I think this is probably the fastest way with contacts. But the point of this video is that there is a lot of stuff you can do with contacts. Just go to the application's contact lists and grab those commands and make your automation. This is the second edition of the Shortcuts Field Guide, and one of the things I'm really happy about including with this new edition is the Advanced Concepts section. Now, when Apple first released Shortcuts, some of this stuff wasn't all that reliable, and I wasn't really convinced I wanted you to put them in your shortcuts because it wasn't working that well, but everything is pretty solid now. So I was able to include all sorts of cool tricks in here, like repeats, base 64, URL schemes, just a bunch of wacky, cool tricks you can do with shortcuts. This is the advanced course section. So go through this slowly, make sure you understand it, and you will find tricks you can use in your everyday shortcuts here. Enjoy! Okay, this video follows the prior video about lists, and if you haven't seen that one yet, I recommend you go back and watch it first because that's kind of the introduction to dictionaries. So where lists are a group of things you've stuck together that don't necessarily have anything in common, dictionaries are a little bit more formatted, a little bit organized, a little bit more powerful type of lists. To see them, go into the search bar and just type dictionary, and you can see there's the primary tools. And one of the first ways I usually use a dictionary is just drag the dictionary command in, and then you can start adding data to it. So I'm going to tap the little plus button to add new item. And the first one will be first name. Next one will be a text field, will be a last name. And then the next we'll do a Boolean field, which is yes or no. Fancy speak for programmers, meaning yes or no. And we'll say shortcuts user. All right, so we've got 3 fields of data in here, and you can already see some differences between lists. First thing is you've got each a label and a data for each line, whereas with lists you just have the data itself. Now the nice thing about these labels is they kind of give us a way to access these variables later in the shortcut without having to identify which line they're on, like on a list. It's just a lot more organized and easier to use. For example, let's say you've got some boxes on your shelf. If you've got 3 boxes up there and there's no labels on them, you know that they hold stuff. You're just not sure what's in them until you pull them off the shelf and start looking through them. And that's what you get with a list. You don't know what kind of data is in there until the program actually accesses it. With a dictionary, you actually know exactly what's in there because each box, in essence, has a label on it. In this case, first name, last name, and shortcuts user. And you know what type of stuff is in that box. In this case, the first 2 boxes have a text field, and the third box has a Boolean field. So that gives us more to work with as we're making our shortcuts. Let's go ahead and add an alert to access some of this data now. Okay, I said my name is that I'm going to access the dictionary. So I'm going to tap the dictionary button next to the magic variable, and that just drops it in there. Now, if I tap on that, it gets me the option to get specific types of data out of there. And I'm going to get the value used for the key first name. You call that first column the keys. So we're going to go ahead and type in first name. And now it's going to insert whatever we've got placed in the data field for first name. So let's add some data. David Sparks, shortcuts user. Oh yeah. Okay, so we've got data in there. We're going to use that in a script. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it gives me an alert. My name is David. Great. Now, one of the things I like about dictionaries is in addition to the better organization of this data we've got, it also gives us the ability to make changes to specific lines of the dictionary, which you can't do with a list. You have to really recreate the entire list if you want to change something on it. With a dictionary, we can go in and surgically change one item. So I'm going to go back up and search for dictionary again. And you can say, here's one, set dictionary value. I'm going to add this to the bottom after the alert. And there's 3 parameters, the key, the value, and the specific dictionary. So the first thing we're going to do is change the key. The key is the column or the label. So we know the key is, in this case, going to be first name. And the value we're going to change it is Omer Samuel, which was almost my name, except for my mom's intervention. And the dictionary we're going to go ahead and select the dictionary with the magic variable. And there's the dictionary right there. Okay, so we've now changed the name, and that first value, that first key has now been changed to Omer Samuel. So let's go ahead and use that with an alert. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say my name is. We're going to insert the dictionary. Once again, change the dictionary to just that first key, first name. And if I did everything right here, we should get 2 alerts with 2 different names. So let's try it out. Okay, first it says my name is David because that's the first value. Once I press OK, it's going to go to the next step, change that value to Omer Samuel, and then it's going to give us a second alert. Hey, it worked. So think of dictionaries as boxes with labels, and you can change the labels and you can change the contents of the box throughout your shortcut. They're a lot more organized and they're a lot easier to work with when you're working with large shortcuts. Another reason to use dictionaries is it lets you set them up right at the beginning of your shortcut. You can just set that dictionaries command like I did and declare, in essence, all of your variables at the get-go. If later you want to make changes to the shortcut, you can make changes to those key terms right there, either manually or through the program. Now, I did it manually in this case where I reset that key value of the first name to a different name, but you could actually take a value from a user input or some calculation you received from some portion of your shortcut, and you could go back and change those key values just like I did, but using that variable name. At this point, we've spent some time going through both lists and dictionaries, and hopefully you understand there's uses for both of them. Simple lists are easy and fast if you've got a real simple shortcut. Choose from list is probably the most common way I implement it because I like the organization, as I explained in the last screencast. But then if I need something more complex, dictionaries are there. You shouldn't let dictionaries intimidate you. They're just a better form of lists, really, and don't be afraid to give them a try, even when they are overkill. Getting comfortable with the tool makes it a lot easier to use it more in the future. Okay, gang, this is one of my favorite sections because this is where I've got some of my favorite useful shortcuts. This is the stuff I use every day to get my work done. Take a look through these, download them, play with them, see what techniques I used, and I'm combining all of the stuff throughout the course in these useful shortcuts. You can customize them all to make them work for you, or you can just download them and start using them. They're a lot of fun, and I bet they will spark a bunch of ideas for you to create your own shortcuts. So go ahead and enjoy my useful shortcuts. Here's a shortcut that arises out of my block scheduling, but I think a lot of people could use it. What if you had a set of events on one day and you just wanted to copy them to another day? You can do that with a shortcut. I've got one here called Copy Day. You can download it in the attached download file to this video. I'm going to hit the ellipses button to go ahead and open it up. And it's not a super complicated shortcut, but there's a few tricks in here. The first one is we're going to ask the user, what's the source day? What is the day that you want to copy? And that is going to be asking for a date and time. And the reason I put time in there is so you can select time of day. Maybe you only want to copy the events from noon instead of the events from 6 a.m. And then it's going to add one day to that because later we're going to want to look at all the events that take place between the source day that you pick and one day after that. That's the selection you're going to make to copy. The next thing we need to figure out is the destination day. And we need to know when the destination day is and how many days are between the source day and the destination day. So we do a command here, get time between source day and destination day in days. So we've got every piece we need now to go ahead and put this together. We're going to find all calendar events where the source day is between the source day and the adjusted date. So that's looking at the first block with source day and the adjusted date, which is one day after. And then we're going to show that list to you, and you're going to be able to choose from that list. And you'll be able to choose multiple events. And this is one of those where we select all initially, because usually if you're going to want to copy a date, you're going to want to copy all of the events. And then with each item, we're going to do a repeat with. Now, each selected item, we're going to add the time between the dates. That's the number of days between them. We're going to add that number of days to each repeat item. And we're going to do that for both the repeat item, which gets you the start time, and also the repeat item for the end time. And then we're going to add that event with that adjusted date in the calendar. So if I start on Monday and I pick events for Wednesday, it's going to add 2 days to each one of those, so it creates it on Wednesday. Let's see it in action. I'm going to go ahead and hit the play button. For the source day, I'll go ahead and pick this Friday. And we'll start first thing in the morning. And I'm going to pick for my destination day 2 days after that, the Sunday, which is September 1. Now it's going to run through and do all that work. I've got a workout. I'm not going to select that. But I've got field guide production and legal work. So scrolling down, I've got legal email and shutdown later in the day. So let's go ahead and just copy those 4 items to Sunday. I'll click done. And now it's gone and done it for me. If I go over to my calendar, you'll see there's Friday the 30th, and then on Sunday the 1st, I've got the exact same 4 events that I copied and created, but I did not grab the workout. I had a different one already scheduled for the same day earlier in the day. Like I said, sometimes you're going to get a block schedule exactly like you want it, and why not use a shortcut to copy that and paste it into a future date? You can do that with this shortcut. Thanks for hanging in and sticking through. I hope you learned some stuff about shortcuts today. If you'd like to learn more, you can get the course. It's 107 videos. It's over 6 hours of content, and there are many downloadable shortcuts. Like I said earlier, I had a great time making it. I really want everybody to get better at shortcuts. I am a huge shortcuts fan, and I hope everybody starts using it. If you want to go all the way down the shortcuts rabbit hole, just head over to learn.macsparky.com and check it out today. Thank you.